Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Rangers Review morning briefing for Wednesday, the 4th of January. I'm Derek Clark, and I'm joined this morning by Joshua Barrie. How are we getting on, Joshua?
Good, Derek. How are you?
Yeah, fantastic. Yep, we had a little soiree last night, didn't we? A Rangers Review meet-up since I'm up in Glasgow, of course, and it was a good time had by all, and clear heads this morning, which is all good. So
we went to what's the restaurant called, because it was good. Tacos Tuesdays at the Locale, Charing Cross.
Yes, yeah,
nice place.
Last
Would
place.
recommend.
Yeah, absolutely. Tacos were divine. Heartily recommend going there if you have time to kill in Glasgow. Anyway, people are tuning in to talk all things Rangers, Joshua. Before we do that, just a bit of housekeeping as ever. You can see the little ticker below. We've still got that tremendous offer on the website. £1 for 2 months worth of coverage. Go and head over to rangersreview.co.uk/subscribe to sign up. It's dead easy to do so. And if you want to sign up to our YouTube channel as well, you can do that. That is totally free. Over 10,500 subscribers now, which is fantastic. Thanks to all who have subscribed and supported the YouTube channel as well. So that is very much appreciated. Okay, the fallout still continues from Monday's Old Firm draw, Joshua. As is the norm, really, with these matches. A couple of points that caught my eye this morning and sort of ties in with the newsletter I wrote last night, and you can sign up to that. That's free as well, folks. It appears on the website the following day, where Michael Beale's comments in his post-match press conference were interesting when he discussed transfers. I'll quickly read over what he said once again. He was asked if major surgery is required. He says, I definitely want to bring in players, but they've got to be the right players. I want John Souttar fit, Ridvan, Yanis Hadji, Tom Lawrence, Kamal Roof, and Antonio Cholak. That will be a start. If we can add 2 or 3 more to it, then we could have a second team as good as the first team that was out there. Then it's game on inside the building. You have to earn your shirt. I think the last few weeks, people have played regardless. None of you knows whether I fancy these players or not because they're the players I've got. And he says this month will be a big month, sorting out 1 or 2 futures, tying 1 or 2 things up. I don't want short-term signings until the end of the season because there is no point to appease myself or the fans. We need people to come in that will be big players for Rangers in the next 2 or 3 years. They don't grow on trees. Win this game. With this game out the way now, it gives me time to get into that. There are some people I have got in mind. So this is a big month, Joshua, for Ross Wilson. I think last season, of course, we saw the deadline day moves for Amad Diallo and Aaron Ramsey. There were short-term signings. Look, I think this window, it can't be similar. It has to be players that are going to come in and shape the future going forward in the next 2 or 3 seasons.
Yeah, and that's difficult to do in January, isn't it? Noticed there as well, James Strachan is saying, I thought it was interesting when Beale said players who want away won't play for a bigger club. The thing is, there's just, as we keep saying, Derek, there's so much information, I think, in all of his press conferences that there's so many of these lines that could be headlines. But what I think people will like about Beale in the way he speaks is he is honest. If he'd come in and said that the squad was absolutely fine, that he didn't need any additions, then people wouldn't believe him, because I don't think that's true. He's had that time to assess it. It's interesting that he says you don't know which players I don't fancy, because at the moment there's been no positive for Beale if he was to say bomb a player out or not play a player or not encourage a player. He's needed everyone on side. He's needed to give everyone a fresh start to get them through to this point. And they were they're 4 or 5 minutes away from a perfect start, 5 wins out of 5 going into the start of the January window, which obviously started just before the Old Firm game.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there will be a few players that he wants to move on. He also said 1 or 2 players that might want to move on themselves if they're not in his plans. Last season was obviously different because Diallo and Ramsey were meant to kind of complement a squad that was already strong and maybe just needed a couple of additions. But what Rangers, I think, have to do now, and it's something we spoke about a lot when Van Bronckhorst came in. I think you've got an overall squad, and the reason you have a director of football is because there should be continuity within the squad and a longer term viewpoint than just the manager. So, for example, when Pedro Caixinha comes in and signs everyone that he does, Carlos Pena, amongst others, and spends a lot of money on them, and they're very suited to his style and very specific. They haven't played in, I don't think Pena had played in European football before. I don't think that's a very intelligent transfer model. Maybe at times there's managers can go and get ex-players. You've seen it with Ten Hag at Man United, and it's worked well. But there should be that continuity between squads, even when the type of midfielder that Van Bronckhorst wants compared to the type of midfielder that Beale wants will be very different. He definitely needs, I think, 2 to 3 players, Derek, as much as anything, just for freshness. Again, as we said yesterday, for a lot of players, that was, I think it was only Ben Davies was playing in his first Old Firm game yesterday. You need, and that's, I guess, a positive in an experience sense, but you also need players who are fresh to come in and approach things differently, just like Beale's been saying with his coaching staff, to come in with a fresh pair of eyes, not people that have been here for a number of years.
Yeah, so many comments coming in. A lot of comments with regards to our backgrounds. Joshua says, Ross says, morning both. 2 different backgrounds for you both today is throwing me off here. And Ross gets in touch. Lovely wallpaper, Derek. I'll pass on your regards. I'm at my mum and dad's. And where are you, Joshua?
I'm at my mum and dad's. We're both back,
there you go.
back home. It's not because we're working over Christmas, Derek. We're doing the January weekend at home, but no, sorry for the change in scenery.
Yeah, it's still very much the festive season. It'll be the familiar background tomorrow, folks. John O'Rourke says as well, missing the familiar background, Derek. Well, don't worry, I'm heading back down to today. Fingers crossed the train is on, because we know the strike action affecting a number of people at the moment. Let's get to 1 or 2 more of these comments coming in. I think this is very harsh. He's come in for a bit of criticism from pundits from the other side of the fence, shall we say, Joshua. Aaron Hornby says that Morelos, I reckon, needs released. I wouldn't go as far as that. I thought he was certainly first half. He wasn't at the races. He missed 2 sitters, of course. Gave the ball away for the first goal. Looked out of sorts. Second half, he came onto a game. I think the goal certainly revitalised him a bit. He was orchestrating the crowd. He nutmegged Maida at one point as well, and you could see the confidence starting to build up through him again. He's still a bit to go, I think, before he's back to the rampaging Buffalo, but being released, I know he's out of contract in the summer. Can you see him moving on perhaps in the January window if an offer is to be made?
I mean, you'd be surprised, but again with Beale, I think he'll I wouldn't be surprised if, for example, Beale had really talked up a player and then they did leave in January, because again, I think he's playing the long game, that there's no benefit of him really freezing players out at the moment, both for upping their value, which is something he's spoken about before, but also if he wants to try and keep him at the club. But Morelos, I thought, was improved in the second half, Derek, something that you can read, obviously, our analysis pieces on the website from yesterday. I think it was 1 duel in 91 in the first half and 5 and 8 in the second half. So that's, we wouldn't always judge a striker's performance on how they, their duel numbers. It's not something that I always would think to go and look at first thing. But Beale said specifically that gave the other forwards room to get Rangers up the pitch, and so maybe his influence was a bit indirect. I think he should do better with his second chance. Again, you can look at kind of the value of those chances on the website. If Morelos is to sign a new deal, he'd be on a lot of money. He's already on a lot of money. I'd imagine one of the big earners at the club. And then you've got to think, well, is that money best spent there? Especially when you've got Čolak, who's going to score you those domestic goals. But then you're looking long term. Is Ruth the answer? I doubt it. But Beale seems to continue to talk him up. And that will all come into it. For me, Ryan Kent's in a slightly different category at the moment, because although when he's not played well at points this season, but I don't think his attitude's ever been in question. We know with Morelos, obviously, it has, to the point that he was dropped earlier this season. I think he's still got some way to go, probably, where he can convince that he's the future and that he should be Rangers starting striker next season. But I just don't think as well he's not going to become that player that finishes those easy chances that Čolak will. I think when Čolak's back in the team, I know we were talking yesterday, Derek, about the fact that he hadn't been subbed on, which I don't think you can read anything into because Rangers were winning. Yeah. I think he'll have a lot more opportunities and score a lot more goals, because don't forget, I think his 11 goals came from 7 expected goals, which is an overperformance. If he has more opportunities in the second half of the season, you'd imagine that he will score as many goals, if not more.
Yeah, a few comments coming in on Morelos. Callum says a blind pass across the pitch are traits you're taught when you're in school, unforgiving in professional football. And Scott's Wilder gets in touch. I said at the time when GVB dropped Morelos that he should never play for the club again. I haven't changed my mind, and he has to go. He's a complete liability. It's not much love for Morelos in the comments today, but like you say, I think Michael Beale touched on it in his post-match press conference as well with regards to the duels. That's how Rangers had that success in that second half, because he was winning balls and creating a bit of space for the likes of Kent and Sakala, who came onto a game as well in that second half. Let's get to a few more of the comments come in. So many coming in. This one we'll touch on very quickly, Joshua. Graham Corkin says, "Morning, Graham. Still laughing at all the noise around the not given penalties. It seems to be a bit of a... I know that Johnny and Chris Sutton were involved in a bit of a Twitter altercation with regards to it. The IFAB, it's all surrounding this Goldson apparent handball. IFAB says it shouldn't have been given. That's the matter closed for me, Joshua. But as is the norm in Glasgow around Old Firm games, if a certain team doesn't get a decision, then it can grow arms and legs. And I just hope that it gets put to bed and we can just concentrate on the following games. But such is life in Glasgow with the Goldfish Bowl.
I just find talking about refereeing decisions actually really boring, Derek, which is... I mean, just... I guess once that came out, I think it was yesterday, the IFAB rules were circulated. I don't think there's much of a discussion about it. So I agree. It's not something that I spend much time thinking about refereeing decisions, I must admit.
Yeah, Stephen, not a fan of Sutton, says he's an utter tube there. And LC says, imagine a ref applying the rules. Surely not. So we'll move on. Let's discuss one or two more things that are coming in here. Jack Joyce, there's going to be a number of players linked with Rangers, Joshua. He says, morning, guys. Any truth in Hugo Vetlesen and Nicholas Raskin? Raskin, I'm not overly familiar with. Vetlesen, I'm sure we've done a scouting piece on him on the website at some point. Patrick Caskey does these fantastic in-depth scouting reports. I would say, by all means, I think he would be most welcome at Ibrox, that sort of midfield dynamo. However, Raskin, are you aware of these players, Joshua?
No, we should just say as well, Derek, that it was very funny seeing Johnny and Sutton, who obviously would defend himself, going at it over that VAR decision. And in a sense, I guess the whole, just to touch on it quickly before we go on, that did become a bit of a talking point after the game. And I guess people interpret the rules differently, but I just thought that I thought it was quite... when I was at the game, I didn't actually notice it. There was some appeals, but it wasn't a huge kind of... There wasn't a lot of noise about it. So no. I was surprised that it became such a big deal after it. Obviously, that Sutton would say that he was just playing by the rules, but I think that they showed that it was the IFAB rule showed that it was too close. Effectively, it was quite similar to the one that was it Connor Goldson got done with? Was it Connor Goldson in Belgium?
Oh my God, yeah, the worst. Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
quite similar to that.
It ricocheted up from. I think James Sands was involved. It ricocheted up.
So I guess the difficulty with when a decision like that is given, it maybe puts it in people's memory bank that it is a penalty. But I didn't think it was. The transfer rumours. Interesting that Beale says he has some people in mind. Again, I think this. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst was happy working under that kind of director of football model. He spoke numerous times in press conferences about the fact that there's no Geo list, there's only a Rangers list. Some people might have taken that as a fact that he was overruled. I personally don't think that's the case. I just think if you look at how certain club operates, some managers will put more emphasis on being involved in the recruitment. Some managers will still be involved, still have the final say about a player, which numerous people, Ross Wilson speaking at the AGM, said that was the case. But I guess it might be a case that some managers, such as Michael Beale, are more involved in the recruitment process. And obviously, he, having been so involved in the youth development scene for so long and probably still really well plugged into that, as much as you'd think Steven Gerrard when he was up the road, his name would attract people. I think Michael Beale, in a similar way, if young players are looking a place they want to go and develop, and they look at the size of the club, and they look at the pathway, someone like a Rebo or a Bassey, under Beale, Rangers becomes quite an attractive proposition. So I'd be surprised if a couple of people don't come in this window, and maybe a couple of people go out as well. Obviously, central midfield is the main priority. I think number 6, another kind of interesting caveat from the weekend, Derek, was the substitutes, which we've got a piece on this on the website. Beale didn't have he brought on Sands, who I don't think he did well. I think you can see he's a player who obviously maybe hasn't played much recently, and his confidence is a bit affected by that. Hasn't played much in his favoured position either. And I think the game was just so quick to come into. That's for me when Stephen Davis would come onto the pitch, or in the 55 season, what Michael Beale said in his press conference, which is again, it was a bit of a strange comparison, I thought, at the time, but he spoke about Bongani Zungu, who people would look at and go, well, he didn't start any games. And I remember thinking this as well at the time. He didn't start any games, so his loan move wasn't a success. But I think there was 5 subs that season. There might not have been, but he came on in, I think, 20 games, Beale said, and just helped to shut them out. And that's obviously, especially now with 5 subs, I guess managers can be a lot more strategic, and they can change half of their outfield. And Stephen Davis, I still think, from Beale's comments, had a role to play this season in coming into games like that, like he did with the Hibs game when it was 3-2. And I thought Rangers actually played a lot better when they went to that kind of flat midfield 3. It just allowed the fullbacks to go a bit higher, gave Kamara a bit more license on the left. So for me, that's why, firstly, that's the type of player that Beale needs, a controller in the middle of the pitch. I think players can fill that position, but I don't think anyone is kind of as natural in it as Stephen Davis. And also on the topic of substitutes, again, you can read the whole piece on the website. It's probably better because it's a longer conversation. I don't think he had much to really work with. And if you look at the circumstance of the players that he had to bring off, if you look at him bringing on Sands, I think because he was responding to Celtic bringing on an extra forward and going 2 up top. If you look at the chances conceded, I don't think it's as simple as saying he got it wrong. If you actually look at the goal, and again the analysis is in this piece, what Beale highlights is running backwards, and it's really obvious when you look at the goal and you see when Jota beats Tavernier, which is obviously too easy. But Rangers the whole game have pressed Celtic side to side. Yeah. And I think the reason they maybe they fell back, it was the first time they really fell back into their penalty area. And I think it was because they'd just been on a kind of breakaway up the pitch, Kent and Kamara, which they ran out of play eventually and didn't make the most out of. And they fall back, and instead of pressing in by the touchline, and then Jota is able to run towards the box. And it's too easy a goal to concede. But Scott Wright and Ryan, I think it's Ryan Jack, both kind of run backwards with their men and follow the runs, instead of running up towards the ball. And that's what the manager highlighted after the game. So I think that was more of an issue than any individual for me.
Yeah. Love this comment that comes in from Neil McBain. He says, nice mug, Joshua. Exactly the same one I'm drinking out of just now.
So well, Britain's best mug. That's when you know when your mum's, if you have the Britain's best mum mug.
Yeah, with the Union Jack on the other side of it, isn't it? So fantastic.
There we go.
Staunch, as they say. Great mug this morning, Joshua. Lots of comments coming in with regards to potential transfer options that people want addressed here. Firstly, we'll touch on William's point shortly. Antonio says, not just this season, but like 3 seasons ago, why haven't we went for Shankland? Is he also not a Jers fan? Lawrence Shankland is a name that's often linked with moves to Rangers. Joshua, I know he's doing pretty well at Hearts at the moment. Lawrence Shankland.
I think Rangers can get better player. I mean, he's obviously scored a lot of goals, but it's the same with a discussion like someone with Sakala, who I think Sakala, obviously, you see he makes an impact against Celtic in the Old Firm a couple of days ago. in my mind, I don't think he'll ever be a nailed-on starter every game for Rangers, but that's okay, because just because a player plays well sometimes doesn't mean that they need to play every week. And equally, because a player scores goals at a Hearts level doesn't mean that they are the striker that Rangers need in the summer. If Rangers were to sign a player like Shanklin to be a squad option, I by no means think he's a bad player by Scottish Premiership standards, but something I think you've seen this season when Rangers went into the Champions League. The jump is so big, and you need to, I think, be signing players with that view in mind. You've got someone like Cholak who's going to score you 20 goals a season in the Scottish Premiership. And again, on that topic of Sakala, you need squad players. You shouldn't have. You look at the options that Celtic had to bring off the bench at the weekend. I know Rangers have injuries, but that's why Beale wants competition. That's why he's saying he wants it to be game on inside the building, because he wants that competition to drive players on, which he hasn't had so far. Up until now, you've basically been able to pick 10 of the starting 11, or if he's going to go for 2 goal scorers, 11. The only time he's really strayed away from that, Sakala, Morelos, Kent, Tillman, Jack, one of Jack, Munsterman, and Kamara, has been when he's needed to rotate them because people have been injured and they haven't been able to play kind of full 90 minutes.
Yeah, and on the back of that, that Shanklin's suggestion, Craig Marshall gets in touch. Morning, Craig. With Alfie going potentially, what are your thoughts on Dykes? Big target man, strong and can finish. I think he would do a job. Lyndon Dykes, I think that he's a name that's been linked, I think, because of the fact Michael Beale has worked with him at QPR. I'm not entirely sure that would be a good option. He would cost a bit of money as well. Lyndon Dykes for you, Joshua, I'm not entirely sure. I think, like you said about Shanklin, I think the Rangers could get better out there.
I think if he keeps, I think he'll want to keep 2 finishers, kind of 2 forwards in the front line, which is something that you've seen obviously with Ruth in the 55 season, but then even more so just before Beale and Gerrard left. You've seen them go 2 up top in more games. Think of the Hibs game at home where Morelos and Ruth both scored in that game, where it very much felt like a front 2. But I think one of those 2, if it is going to be Cholak and someone domestically, one of them has to be a player who can take the ball into feet and drop into the midfield and impact the game there, which I don't know if that's Dykes' game. But I think you hope as well that there's a few names linked that you don't know much about. Some people spend a lot of time will know all these players linked, but I always think it's good if you hear of players as well who you maybe don't know much about, because Rangers, I think where they are in the food chain, they should be kind of tapping into these markets that are a little bit less known and not always going down to the English Championship. So yeah, I don't know if Dykes is the profile of player that they're looking for, but if Morelos is to go in the summer, you do need a lot of additions up top. I know we kind of said this last season, but you are in a position, you're not going to probably extend Davis, Jack, Arfield, maybe Jack stays, I don't know, McGregor this summer. When you take into consideration the players who need to move on, someone like Sands and Tillman going back on loan, I'd be surprised if Sands come back. I hope Tillman will. It's good. There's going to need to be a lot of movement in the summer window, and maybe the best way to kind of negotiate that is get a few starters in, as difficult as it is in January, to make sure that when it does get to the summer, it's not a total overhaul because you've got so many players going out the door.
Yeah, and an interesting comment coming in here from Jack Joyce. He says, we'd like to see us sign Chris Willock from QPR. He's a top player. I just had a quick glance when his contract is up. It's up in the summer, if I'm not mistaken. Otherwise, he would have cost a fair chunk of cash. Now, Neil Banfield worked with him at Arsenal. I think that was one of the big reasons why he enticed him to Loftus Road. Who knows? He may be able to entice him to Glasgow. He's certainly one player I think that would excite the fans. Josh, I'm not too sure if you've seen much of him, but he's a top player.
Just when I was watching QPR when Beale was coming up the road, Rangers have had quite good success with some pre-contracts in the past. I don't know what age he is. Is he at an age where he could maybe go top end of the Championship, bottom end
24.
of 24? Yeah, so I don't know. Again, I think Beale if Rangers as a club obviously can sell they can sell the experience of playing for the club, and which is kind of unmatched in any. Say, for example, you're in for a club like Burnley, who incidentally have played a lot of good football this season, actually. So maybe a bad example, but someone who can probably offer you more money than Rangers. Obviously, they can't compete with everything else, the stature, the type of games you get to play in, playing for a club that size. I think when you match in the fact that you have someone like Michael Beale, who is a developer of players, that's where his background is, that's where his experience is, and Rangers should be a really attractive proposition for these type of clubs. And it's interesting that Beale says at the end of his answer, he says players that will be big players for Rangers for the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
Because that's what they need to do. They need to get these players in, maximise their value, and sell them for a lot more than they brought them in for. I know Aribo didn't go for loads of money, but Bassey's maybe a better example, but he was obviously a very extreme example because it was a 6-month rise almost instead of a 2 or 3 year one. But that's what Rangers need to do. And Tillman, I think, will be the exact same. I thought he was a player at the weekend too. Maybe didn't impact the game as you thought he would. Didn't get a goal or didn't set up a goal. But I thought it was a performance that showed, that kind of vindicated Beale when Beale says he thinks his best position is as a number 8. I don't think he was a liability defensively. Maybe had a couple of moments, but I'm sure everyone did in a game that was that fast. Occupied Celtic players when he had the ball. And that's his first Old Firm. A player he's often compared to as an attacking midfielder as Aribo. It took Aribo a long time to really stamp his authority in Old Firm games. He actually didn't. I don't think he played many in his first season. So I think that's an encouraging sign that Tillman, still at 20, obviously in his second Old Firm actually, had a performance for me that was really, he was quite dependable in that midfield, because I think a lot of people were surprised, myself included, that Beale didn't go for a more maybe conservative midfield 3 and push Tillman up a line.
Yeah, most definitely. William Matheson's point here, I just wanted to quickly touch on. It's something we've discussed at length in previous videos, Joshua. What's your thoughts on the goalkeeper situation going forward? I think Michael Beale has come out and said it's not an area you'll look to strengthen in this window. I know that lots of supporters think that a new goalkeeper is required. Certainly it is required for the next 2 or 3 years, that's for sure. But it looks like it's going to be McGregor is his preferred goalkeeper. I think this is going to be his last season. I would be mightily surprised if he signs another new contract at the end of it. But the Robbie McCrory, I think, when I asked him about Robbie McCrory, he says he was torn as to whether to send him out on loan for the next 6 months. I would be inclined to do that because he's at an age where he has to be playing football, isn't he? And it's no good for him being a third-choice goalkeeper at Rangers.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have spoken about this a lot, so people have probably heard our thoughts on it. But I guess the goalkeepers developed slightly later. McGregor started playing for Rangers at what, 25, 24? Something like that.
Same age as McCrory.
Yeah, same age as McCrory. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's something that should have been sorted out in the summer, Derek, and as a result, the kind of conversation surrounds it. Maybe it will change. I don't think we've seen terrible goalkeeping performances since Beale came in. I think McGregor can still make those saves that, the Europa League run was a perfect example of it. He can still make those saves that defy. He makes saves that he shouldn't, but I just don't think he can do it as consistently anymore. So I don't think a keeper will come in January. I definitely think it's something that will be sorted out in the summer. And I think if you look at the numbers, which we've obviously got quite a few articles on the website about it, it is something that should have been sorted out. Obviously, team performance comes into that. How many, if you were to take a stat on how many players have performed below average for Rangers this season outfield, I'm sure it'd be pretty high as well. So I guess that needs to come into context. But it's hard to argue that it's been a success what Rangers decided to do in that position in the summer.
Yeah, and we'll finish up with this comment from Craig Marshall, who says, I know you love the kid. Derek Affeline is a cracking player. Maybe one in the summer, very creative on the ball and will only get better under Beale. He's talking about Dapo Affeline at Bolton. He was actually out the side earlier on in the season, but it done him the world of good. He's come back in. He's now learning to play as a number 9, and he's really thriving in that Bolton Wanderers side. Absolutely would love to see him at Ibrox at some point. In the future, I think he has a real talent. Another one that's took to the game late on in his career. He actually went to university and all that, and then joined West Ham, played non-league football, and then was released from there. And Bolton were able to snap him up. And yeah, he's thriving there. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a number of clubs sniffing about him come the summer, and it wouldn't be. I think it would be folly for Rangers not to be one of them. But yeah, there's going to be a number of players linked to Rangers this month. I think it's clear for all to see that movement has to happen and new faces need to enter the building. I think that'll do us there, folks. Thanks to everyone for interacting with the show as ever. It's greatly appreciated. Just a reminder, the offer on the website, just £1 for 2 months worth of content. Go and head over to rangersreview.co.uk/subscribe for all the details. And if you want to sign up to the YouTube channel, it's totally free as well. It'll be great if you can support the channel also. Okay, we'll be back again tomorrow. I'll be back in my more familiar surroundings, folks with a familiar background. Joshua, will you be the same?
I won't be, no. I'll still be here. So I have to get used to it for a couple more days. But yeah, thanks to everyone for watching as ever. And yeah, speak to you tomorrow.
Absolutely. Right, bye for now, folks. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.